Hello. There are some individuals who are so creative, passionate, and genuinely awesome that they can excite, entertain, and inspire you so much it feels like they are casting a magic spell. My guest today is one such individual, someone who was so great to talk to that I had to invite him back for another conversation. This is an individual who has created over the last 20 years a fantasy realm that is just incredible. It has been turned into a museum exhibition by the WETA Workshop. It has been narrated by Stephen Fry. And now it is going to be a Dungeons and Dragons sourcebook. And with that D&D Kickstarter launching soon, it felt like the perfect excuse really, for me to summon back someone who I had so much fun talking with that I wanted to do it all again. We talk about building the most incredible wargaming boards, that world of the Gloaming and what it has taken to create it over 20 years, and how all of that has been poured into an incredible sourcebook for the role-playing game D&D. I'm Jordan, this is Jordan Sorcery, and today I'm in conversation once again with Johnny Fraser-Allen. Johnny, thanks for joining me again. I'm really excited to be talking to you again about some of the stuff that you've been working on. We're going to get into the amazing Gloaming, the scenery, the world that you're building, and what you're doing in that space. First, though, I thought it would be fun to talk a little bit about some of the cool builds, the terrain, the tabletop sort of layouts that you've built for Star Wars, like your Hoth table and your AT-AT. Could you talk a bit about those as projects? How did you get started on those?
Well, sure. I mean, I guess same with it. It all kind of feeds into the Gloaming, really, because I'm absolutely obsessed with visual immersion, and what happens on my tabletop, I want it to feel the same way as when I went into the Lake Town set on the Hobbit or the Edoras set and Lord of the Rings. I I love film sets, and I think we talked on the last episode that like even some of the Star Wars content that's coming out now that I don't like as much as my OG trilogy films, the sets just keep getting better. I can just watch that stuff on mute. I love film sets, and I want my game tables to feel like film sets. And also, it makes me love the films more. I didn't think you could love Labyrinth or Empire Strikes Back or Return of the Jedi more, but when I spend 6 months building Bright Tree Village or building Echo Base, studying the Battlefront 2 maps, and pausing the movie and watching it for the thousandth time, the movies become better because like I already appreciated everything in them. But I guess what I stand for most in my tabletop gaming craft, and especially what I'm doing with the Gloaming, is hands-on tactical craft. Like the creatures of Phil Tippett and Jabba's palace. Made of rubber, barely lit in the background. I mean, I grew up watching them on VHS. It was grainy, like I didn't know what half of them looked like until I saw someone else's action figure. But they were so magical to me because they were physical and real, and that really ingrained in me the physical and the real. And so when I made Echo Base, like I studied the blueprints, the original blueprints of it, and I knew I had this much table to make it, and I wanted to make it as realistic as possible, but I could only really afford to do it kit bashing. I say afford. I'm really Richard Hammond from Jurassic Park when it comes to my tabletop builds. I'm really spare no expense. McShane, yeah, well, it's my dog drinking in the background. I'm in the kitchen because my baby's asleep upstairs next to the room where we did our thing last time, which is why I'm under the Muppet Theatre, which I built for her for some puppet shows. Anyway, so the like Echo basically took about 6 months of weekends, and it's because I want to go somewhere when I play a tabletop game, and it's the same for D&D. And the reason I put so much work into Hoth and I've actually got about 12 full planets done now. I've got Dagobah, Tatooine. I'm working on Jabba's palace at the moment because I'm going to be doing a Dungeons and Dragons campaign set. It's basically telling my idea of what I wanted the sequels to be, and it's going to be set 10 years after Return of the Jedi. And so I want to take my players to worlds as immersive as what George Lucas and Gary Kurtz gave us with the original Star Wars trilogy. And but my Star Wars stuff is my sneaky secret shame on the side in a way, because it's the only stuff that really doesn't feed into the Gloaming. Whereas everything in printable scenery and everything I make for my Dungeons and Dragons campaign, all of that work is really going towards building this massive world and this massive campaign of turning my world of the Gloaming into a Dungeons and Dragons playable campaign and world. And I'm launching that very, very soon on Kickstarter as its first kind of its first introduction into the world as a monster manual. It's called the Gloaming Adventurer's Survival Guide, and it's called that because I mean, I've worked on it for 20 years. I've hand sculpted every single goblin, every single creature. Goblins are one of 150, you know, every single creature that's in this thing to the level I watched my peers sculpt Grishnak, Gimli, Gollum, and Gloin, you know, like I'm not saying I'm as good as some of those sculptors like Jamie Biswarrick who brought those creatures to life, but I think you should always aspire to your heroes. You know what I mean? So, like I wanted to, for me as a kid, when you walk into the cantina, I love Mark Hamill, but it's like, why is the movie about that guy? Like, look at these. You know what I mean? I want to know these guys' story. Just like, we don't need to go to the Death Star. Just keep the camera in here. You know, and so creatures have always obsessed me. And I mean, I know, and the world knows from the box office failure of Dark Crystal, that humans as a species and as a whole and as an audience of entertainment require a human avatar to go through that world for them to be comfortable with. For me, it's much more, and like I see humans every day. I don't need to see them in my hobby time, you know. Sometimes, like, you know, like it always interested me when you play D&D and people chose to be humans, or, you know, it's like, you're collecting Empire. Have you seen the orcs? You know, Escape were amazing. You know, it's like, don't you see people every day? When's the last time you saw a rat man? This is awesome. And so, like, and so for me, the Gloaming, I really wanted to focus on on creatures, but not just creatures of medieval folklore, because you know, 17 years working. I mean, well, 20 years now because I still do it after leaving WETA, but I've worked designing creatures for movies. I'm working on a movie right now. I can't talk about designing creatures. And you know, the more creaturey, the better. But I love a brief, you know, like whether it's for Spielberg's BFG or, you know, how the brief changed from Guillermo's dwarves to Peter's dwarves, totally different things. It's like, oh, the brief's changed, a new challenge, whatever it is. Do you know what I mean? And so for me, the Gloaming has always been my take on medieval folklore and its essence being really important, and studying what that is and reading all the facts of every creature and their origins and where they came from, and try to tackle every creature as realistically and honestly and creatively as WETA Workshop and my peers tackled the armor of the Rohirrim, or the heraldry of the Galadrim, or the Minas Tirith Gondorians, right down to you know, as a teenager, you know, you take everything way more seriously. I just remember being fascinated and thrilled to learn that it was an inaccuracy when Meriadoc Brandabuck goes, tomatoes, because Tolkien revised Lord of the Rings later on in the further edition to take tomatoes out, as they would have been introduced to medieval Europe and the Spanish conquest. And he felt Middle-earth was an allegory of the time period that really kind of was lost in the Norman conquest. Do you know what I mean? And like, right. he wanted to write the lost medieval British history, but not too, like, it was also his own thing. But it vexed him later on that he'd written the word tomatoes. Like, I love when things are taken that seriously. You know what I mean? Now,
Well,
I'm recycling a lot of subfacts that have stayed in my brain since I was 14, and I'm almost 40 now. So there's probably a Tolkien night out there listening to that and finding some inaccuracies in that quote that my brain has misremembered. But it's that kind of thing that
hmm,
that drives me. I love it. I love the attention to detail, and you get that attention to detail in my mind from overthinking everything and hand sculpting
hmm,
everything. But it also goes back to something I've heard you say in a lot of your interviews with all the greats you've interviewed, and often they've said it themselves, which is how limitations breed
hmm.
creativity. I mean, there's no better example of that when you compare A New Hope to The Phantom Menace.
Sure.
It's like you can only do so much here. You can do whatever you want here, and I'm not dissing the prequels in any way. I just find the original trilogy that had so much less to work with so much more visually interesting because they were in some ways forced to hold back because of the
Yeah.
limitations of technology and budget.
I mean, how do you account for that sort of thing? So you were talking about Jabba's palace, right? And that it's super dark and it's grainy and all that sort of stuff. And some of that is yeah, limitations of technology for whether that's lighting or transfer of the film. Some of that I'm assuming was a choice to hide, think we don't want people to be able to see the seams in the suits or some of the sort of, the cut edges and the shortcuts they've had to take in some of those suits to make them work. So how do you account for that kind of thing when you're looking at blueprints and full pictures and how do you bring the spirit of that sort of creativity where it was cutting corners because you had to? How do you bring that to the table and the sort of immersive world building that you're doing?
Well, one thing as I said, I've made nearly all of the places in the galaxy from the original trilogy that I want to. Jabba's palace is my favorite Star Wars destination, but I saved it for last
Hmm.
because I wanted the other 10 I did before it to make me a better artist to make sure Jabba's palace was perfect because I wanted to visit there since I was 5 years old. Um, I've been trying to make it since I was five, but apparently 5-year-olds are crap at model making. But I didn't know. I've never had a filter for ambition. Like at 14, before I heard Peter Jackson was making the Lord of the Rings, I'd written the entire script of Fellowship of the Ring, made all the costumes, and started filming it with classmates. It was so crap, but I didn't think. I always bit off more than I can chew in that way. Anyway, but what I found on Echo Base was the good thing about the internet is you can get lots of reference, but like I can reference the sets and how it should look from Battlefront 2 or the movies, but I'm making a model, and so I Google how other people have made these models, and everyone like for Jabba's Palace and Echo Base, two prime examples. Everyone who makes these models beautifully and accurately, and often they make not many people have made them for Star Wars Legion,
Hmm.
but many people have made them to display their Kenner action figures, right? And for Hoth, everyone just makes white. Well, a lot of people just make white wall to represent the white snow,
Hmm.
which is similar to technically how it was built if you see on-set photographs, but it's not how it was lit or color graded when you watch the movie. And I want to be in the movie. Jabba's palace, when you just see the sets, it's that very pale tan of Tatooine, but then in the movie, it's a dark sewer-like brown, right? And at the end of the day, when I slap this board on my table, I'm usually playing it in the daylight in my lounge, and we have so many windows in our quirky 70s house, they don't all have curtains. I can't control the lighting. And even if I could, the people that are lighting the Star Wars set are lighting an aircraft carrier size set with $100,000 worth of lighting. You know what I mean? And I'm not going to be able to do that with LEDs. So I want to paint and create the sets to be like the LED. Sorry, like how the sets look in the movie. Like for
Right.
example, this is one of the creatures in the Gloaming. It's just one picture of a little forest hatchling dragon. But to make that picture, because of my love of how good Lord of the Rings looks and how good Return of the Jedi looks, I hand sculpted this entire dragon forest hatchling and took photographs of it outside in natural lighting and composited it into a real forest picture. And subsequently, I'm giving away the sculpture for anybody that signs up to the Gloaming website or gets alerted to the upcoming Kickstarter. That's my shameless plug there. But
That's so good.
but but also like See, I've painted in Photoshop for directors for 20 years. The BFG was a Photoshop design. You know, the trolls for Guillermo's Hobbit, whatever, Photoshop designs. And I'm proud of my work, and it struck a chord in, you know, creative geniuses. But it's not. I don't even consider a folio piece. I wouldn't frame it and put it on my wall. Photoshop was a means to an end to quickly convey images to a director who may ask for changes, and you make those changes. But when I look at it, I don't feel what I feel when I look at me trying to make out a man in the back corner of Jabba's palace. Because why aren't they showcasing that creature? He's, you know, or like the 3 seconds you see of Max Rebo playing his organ. It's like, wow, what, you know, why isn't that Luke Skywalker? You know, anyway, so like, but a lot of that comes from the fact that people have pushed their thumbs around clay and molded it in rubber and lit it and performed it, and it's all on celluloid and everything like that. And so while I don't have the budget to make the movie of the Gloaming that's in my head, I'm trying to, in the same way we've talked about trying to get my Star Wars tables to the board. Look, I say my players, I want me to feel like I'm stepping in to Star Wars, because I've always wanted to go to Star Wars. This is the closest I'm going to get, you know, because going to Galaxy's Edge isn't going to Star Wars, because you're having to fight around a bunch of tourists drinking Coke. That's not Star Wars. You know, so I want to really go there in my mind, and I also love model making, so it's a happy marriage there. But like, again, like the I could design this guy in Photoshop. I might even design him better, but the image of light capturing him in that one still, and you know, I do compositing in Photoshop as a tool, but it's all, everything I composite is all real elements, because I want to create that Spielberg shot. You know, I don't have the $300 million budget of some of the movies I've had the privilege to design on, but I very unfeasibly and cruelly to myself for 20 years have given myself the mandate to reach the same visual image, that stirring. I want to put people in the Gloaming, basically, the same way that I put myself in Echo Base when I play a game of Star Wars Legend, or I'm gonna put myself in Jabba's palace.
Yeah.
But most importantly, I want people to be able to put themselves in the Gloaming and the township and everything I'm building around that in this next campaign, and visually I'm achieving that. I'm going to grab the book. I should have had handy. Hold on. All right, so I've just come back from Gary Con. Gary Con is Gary. I know you know it, but some of you viewers might not, George. So Gary Gygax, who invented Dungeons and Dragons. There's this ever-growing and burgeoning convention called Gary Con, which is a celebration of Dungeons and Dragons. It's like Gen Con for board games. This is Gary Con for Dungeons and Dragons, and Luke Gygax's son very kindly invited me and gave me a booth. And that was, I couldn't turn that down. And so for that, I made a preview copy, and I'll send you all the actual images for this, of what the Gloaming's going to be. But, you know, here's, let me just grab any kind of spread here. So this is a Gloaming Shambler. But so the idea is on this page, you know, the DM can say, you know, you run into a Gloaming Shambler, but then all the rules are here, you know. But because for me, with other monster manuals, at best you have like a little black and white line of the picture, and often you only get that one in every 3 scrolls, and that always disappoints me, because it's like the art and the creature design is so interesting and so important, especially if you've paid for this book, right? So I wanted to like offer everything that you get for a Dungeons and Dragons monster manual. All of the stats. I've worked with Matt Rauscher, who's a professional monster manual creator. He's created them before, but I didn't want to just give you a line illustration for every character. I wanted to drop you into a Spielberg, Guillermo del Toro-esque scene with that character. Every single page, you know, there's an animated tree stump you know. Um, and you know his so this is one of my favorites. This is a bridge troll, and I'll send you the actual images. But
Yeah.
when you walk over them, they actually kind of rise up. And again, this is just a preview copy. And on the Kickstarter, we're going to be you're going to be able to download a good massive portion of the book just for free to see if you want it or not. Um, but yeah, it's one of those unfeasible things where a, a company couldn't pay to Games Workshop, titans as they are. um I don't think they would feasibly be able to pay to produce a book like this in terms of how it's been created, in terms of me hand sculpting every single creature just to make a monster manual. But that's the only way that I could think of to achieve that that vibe that I had as a kid, or that I have at 39, watching Return of the Jedi or Empire Strikes Back or Labyrinth or Dark Crystal. Um, and I don't think it's nostalgia, because I've thought about that. I've thought about that very hard. And I think the best example I can give to why I don't think it's nostalgia is because I feel like I'm really brutal and honest with myself about uh, when it's right, it's right. I guess I love being proved wrong, is what I'm saying. Look, when I heard they were making a sequel, not a sequel, a television series to The Dark Crystal, right? I absolutely knew I was completely wrong, but I absolutely knew that they weren't going to be able to pull it off, because the first Dark Crystal movie was made in the 70s at the height of Jim Henson's power, getting together all his cool hippie puppeteer friends to further the artistry of puppetry.
Mm.
And it was before producer interference, and production companies going, we've tested it with our audiences. You're going to need to put a Kardashian in it for it to work. Like nobody did any of that kind of stuff, right? And they, for 7 years, they just worked. I mean, I can't remember if I talked about it last time or not, but like the Dark Crystal was originally so bizarre that it wasn't even going to be in English, and it wasn't even going to have subtitles. You're just going to get transported to this word. Yeah, and so instead of trial by stone, it was going to be like, like, what are they saying? I don't know. They're hitting a stone. I guess they're having a trial by stone. I'm not sure. And that's absolutely crazy. But like that was how visionary it was. And for me that's I guess that's the kind of intensity I put into. Anyway, yeah. So but then I heard like they're making this TV series, and it's like, there's no way in this age of producer-driven content that they're going to make 8 hours of Dark Crystal without the original people involved, without Jim Henson, without that magic, and they really knocked it out of the park. I've never been happier to be proved wrong, right? And so it had nothing to do with nostalgia. Like honestly, my love and passion for Dark Crystal is all about craft and creativity and the human and endeavor of artistry, and that's what came through in the TV series. Like, nitpicking, I still like the original movie better, but in terms of making a follow-up TV show, they did 110% of the job, knocked it out of the park.
Sure. I mean,
and what's the thing about? Oh, sorry, go on.
Well, I was going to ask about that though. So there's an interesting sort of almost set of lessons perhaps to explore from that experiment, I guess, the Dark Crystal, right? So there were compromises made when making the original in order to make it more accessible to audiences, but it still didn't work. It wasn't a successful release. And then the show also, they did give it 110%, and they went back and they actually recreated as much as they could in the sort of traditional style. Incredible creation and production.
It still gets
And it
canceled.
wasn't, yeah. So what do you take from that as a creator and admiring the sort of pure creativity of those projects, knowing that they didn't succeed? What do you draw from that and sort of take into your projects?
I realize what a stubborn, unmovable bastard I am, to be honest, because I know why those things didn't work. And they're all of those reasons are the reasons I love those things. And I'm equally unwilling to let go of those things in my work. I mean, I've spent 20 years hand sculpting a bunch of creatures. I'll never make that money back, but that's where my passion my passion is. And that the you know it's I guess I just creatively I have to follow my heart and it really interests. I always try, as much as I enjoy every film, I try to dissect why I'm enjoying it, why I didn't enjoy that, why did that Star Wars movie change my life, and why did that Star Wars movie boggle my mind as to how that was able to be released, sort of thing. Like why was that Star Wars TV series the most lovely breath of fresh air and reinvention of what television should be, and why was that Star Wars TV series terrible? Like, but also like, how did they pull off the Dark Crystal? And also at the end of the day, it's everything is so subjective. It's like for every Star Wars thing I love, someone hates it. For every Star Wars thing I hate, someone loves it. Like the Dark Crystal TV show that I think was a miracle didn't reach its audience. And I've no delusions of grandeur about my work and what I do. And a lesson, I don't know if this is a lesson I learned, but something taken from my Hagglethorn Hollow venture is that I made this. I think I talked about it last time, but if I made Hagglethorn Hollow for a product, it never would have been what it became. I only made Hagglethorn Hollow because I couldn't find anything like I was looking for on the market. Every model, every gaming terrain building, the walls were laughably thin. The stories were too short. There wasn't that much play space in them, and all of them looked like they were built yesterday by master craftsmen. And I wanted Ankh-Morpork, I wanted this towering, crumbling medieval skyscraper city that looked like it's going to collapse if you sneezed. And so I had to hand sculpt it, and I did. And I sculpted it exactly how I wanted it. I sculpted exactly how I saw Ankh-Morpork when I read the books. And it's not an Ankh-Morpork product, but I use Ankh-Morpork as a reference because I there was nothing out there that when I read the Guard series from Terry Pratchett, like it's so claustrophobic and dirty and grimy. And the closest thing I ever felt to it was Terry Pratchett's Jabberwocky, like when the king's trying to eat and plaster's falling into his meal, and it's like it's so grimy and so dirty and crumbling. And I wanted to create that for my tabletop, and I had to hand sculpt it, and it cost me a fortune, but it found its audience because I'd done something just for me. I hadn't thought about anybody else. I hadn't thought about production. It's amazing we produced it and got it out there, but we did, and people responded to it well. And it's the same thing with this book. And something, I already loved your channel already, but like, I knew you were the guy for me when like you did that episode on is AI gonna destroy the artistry of tabletop gaming, and the answer is absolutely yes. Because and it already has started for me, and I don't want to get into it too much. It's but it's it's cool that non-artistic people can express themselves through this thing or whatever. But like, I guess my journey through becoming a better artist has been so important, not only to me but to the art. The Gloaming as a project started because I wanted to teach myself sculpting, and I gave myself a parameter around that sculpting, which became the Gloaming, which forced me to keep sculpting more. And the Gloaming as a project has opened so many more doors for me than anything I've worked on in film. Nobody cares that I did whatever character in The Hobbit or BFG or whatever. I don't care. But people have responded to the Gloaming, and but it's been like, I Nomin, the studio that does creative tutorials, one of the leading places in the world for this, approached me to do my second DVD tutorial for them last year, and I started, and then AI came out, and I actually got quite forlorn and broken down about it. Um, because it's like, what can I offer now as a conceptual designer when anyone can type in these prompts and do a
Mm.
relatively okay job themselves? But like we are talking about with, it's funny, you mentioned about the Dark Crystal, like what do you take from it not reaching an audience and flopping? And the best thing I've ever taken from it is one of the best things I've ever taken from anything. It's a little mantra I created for myself when things get dark, like AI or jobs running out here, or me realizing how much time and money I've spent sculpting to make a monster manual that's never going to pay off. Because it's not about paying off, it's not important. But the mantra I get out of that is every time I feel like packing it in or this isn't working out, I just think, well, the Dark Crystal bombed at the box office. Labyrinth didn't do great at the box office. And when I think of, like, for me, the two greatest creative physical endeavors of creativity that mankind has ever produced
Mm.
didn't reach their audience. But I don't know. I'm just randomly plucking any, like, most Adam Sandler movies probably made more than The Dark Crystal. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like if you think about that, you can focus on that and you can quit, right?
Mm.
It's like, well, don't focus on that. Focus on how that film changed your life,
Yeah.
how it affected you as a child, how it affected you as an adult. It's like that's the, and again, like we as a people as a species, we want to do what we love, and I haven't I very rarely feel love or passion more than the times I experienced those movies. And I think my life has been about kind of trying to capture those moments again. But as you get older and as you mature and as your talents increase, um, you're capturing the range of capturing it gets bigger. And I think I relate it to one of my earliest childhood memories as being 4 years old in a swimming pool in Rarotonga, and my dad's teaching me how to swim. And that's this chubby yam-shaped little baby, flapping around, trying to swim, not made for swimming. And I remember putting me down and they go, okay, now swim to me, and I'd swim and I get it. And then about the fifth or sixth time, I remember opening my eyes underwater and I was watching his legs slowly walk backwards. Now, as an adult, I can see that he was furthering the distance for me to swim so I could get better and more confidence. As a child, I felt that was an absolute betrayal, and it made swimming way more scary for me, right?
Mm.
But I find my creative journey in life as like my dad's bandy legs in the swimming pool walking backwards. Like I've set the I want to get here, and I kept swimming towards it. But as I become a better swimmer, as I grow, that milestone keeps walking backwards, and it's annoying and it's scary and it feels like it's never going to end. But I'm determined and stubborn and keep swimming, and
Yeah.
I get better as we go. But so that line keeps going out. So in some ways, I don't think I'm ever going to be creatively satisfied. But that creative dissatisfaction has pushed me to places which is already so far past the point where I was trying to swim to. Now I'm
Yeah.
trying to swim to here. I'm trying to swim here. But at one point, I was only trying to get to here, and I'm so far past that point now, right? But I'm still not as happy as I thought I'd be as when I got to that point. But
Sure.
as sad as that is, if I didn't have that creative dissatisfaction, I wouldn't still be growing as an artist, and that
Mm.
that really excites me. And so,
Yeah.
like the Gloaming Monster Manual is for me, it's yeah, I started it 20 years ago. Yeah, it's going to come out this year. But that is the absolute full circle of just I started a sculptural visual project that I wanted to look like a blockbuster movie for tabletop gaming, right? So limited market, unfeasible production value, right? But that was my goal, and it took 20 years to get it exactly how I wanted it to.
Mm.
But where I wanted it to be was so far above and beyond my ability at the time when I started it. But that's what's so that that's what I'm proud of now
Yeah.
is that despite all odds and all logic, I didn't give up on trying to do that.
Yeah.
And in terms of grand scheme of the world, I mean, such a small thing to achieve, really. But I mean, it has been an exhibition that's traveled the world. I mean, part of the offering on this Kickstarter is there's going to be a DVD, basically an hour-long documentary narration into the Gloaming that's narrated by Stephen Fry, as I mentioned with you last time, because when he saw the Gloaming, he came around the WETA as the mayor of Lake Town. We bonded over our mutual love for the actor Richard Burton, and then a couple of years later, by the time he left, he not only offered to narrate the Gloaming, but he ended up paying for his own studio recording costs in London to do it. And as I think I said last time, that's more of a tribute to what a wonderful man he is, as opposed to my work. But like I say, it's like I just keep chipping along and chipping along until it's what I want. But for me, what I want is something as good as the Dark Crystal or Labyrinth. But that was 7 years, $70 million, 2,000 geniuses. You know what I mean? And I'm doing all of that on a hobby budget, But that's why it's taken 20 years. But
I mean, there's something interesting, I think, in that. So the Dark Crystal, maybe it didn't reach its audience in the sort of general terms, but it clearly met an audience, including yourself, and it's had a profound effect on you and your career and sort of your creativity. So it has served that purpose, and that is one of the key things I imagine that drives any kind of creator. And same with Labyrinth, that's had a long tail that's gone on to inspire so much stuff since, even if it wasn't a big box office hit at the time. So there is definitely, that's the full circle in a way, that it has brought us round to this.
Well, just look how much both Labyrinth and Dark Crystal have influenced the work of Games Workshop. I mean,
exactly.
The Zenth, that's a Skeksis, every time they put in a quirky little goblin, whether it's for Nurgle or a lot of the stuff that came out with that recent, those kind of swamp orcs, they revamped the orcs to be a little bit more workshopy. There's lots of Labyrinth influence in there, and I say the more the better. I mean, but here's the thing with influence. I've been thinking about that a lot lately because, like, there was a Kickstarter that came out recently that was inspired by Studio Ghibli, and I was like, but that's not inspired. You've just directly ripped off the style of Studio Ghibli, but I'm like, why am I uncomfortable with that? Because I've often said my stuff is sort of inspired by Henson's work, but I don't feel it's derivative. I think it's completely its own thing. But I think I talked about last time. For me, it's like I feel like a creative whiskey distillery where you pour in, you're pouring in Phil Tippett and Brian Froud and WETA Workshop and Ralph Bakshi and the music of Tom Waits, and then you sprinkle some Mervyn Peake and some Terry Pratchett in there, and you stir it all around, and drips of all of these ingredients come out for 20 years and eventually fill a bottle of spirits, which is the Gloaming, right? And it's like people say, like Lucas, he borrowed from Kurosawa and Flash Gordon, and King Arthurian legend, and people love to bang on about that. But I mean, ultimately, this young man wrote what he thought would be the coolest thing, and he was, the Ewoks are inspired by him growing up during the Vietnam War. The Millennium Falcon and the speeder bikes, that's because he was a boy racer. You know what I mean? That's so he can't help the life he grew up in, but he took all of that, and so I don't like. Sometimes I think inspired by can be a dirty word because people can sum things up. Like, Lucas was funneling, a quarter of a century worth of life experience into a script, right? But people find it easier to sum that up by going, oh, it was kind of like Hidden Fortress and it was kind of like Flash Gordon, blah, 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 blah. It's like, well, it's not really. Those are minor. I mean, the big or minor influences, whatever, he's the filtering system that pushed those out. I feel like the same with my work. There's months and months, potentially over a year's worth of work of conceptual designs I did for Guillermo del Toro on his Hobbit that legally can never be seen. But all of that work, what I learned from working with a man that genius that closely, um, all of that filtered into the gloaming. Like that was a big element that got tipped into my whiskey distillery that dripped out. You know,
Yeah.
you know what early Terry Gilliam movies, early Spielberg movies. It's really important to me to rewatch them and understand why, you know, in a crushing world, that moment lifted my spirit. And why does it mean that to me? And how can I put that meaning into my work to try and reach someone else? It may never do that, but yeah, it's important. That stuff's important to me. So I'm not just some dude sitting at home drawing goblins. You know? But it feels bigger than that to me. And I know creating a fantasy world in the scheme of things and the world and the universe isn't a big thing, but find what you're passionate about and do it 110% is what I've always done.
Hmm.
And it's done well for me so far and opened some doors and made me some amazing creative friends that I'd never dream of, and so it's been good.
Good. Well, let's talk the Gloaming then. So, what is the Gloaming as both a world, but then also as a Kickstarter? So, what's happening right now with the Gloaming?
Well, it's coming out as not only a monster manual. So, I mean, this is like 1/6 of it, right? But it's this visually involved. But also there's a side book that's coming out with it, which is Thelonious Cretch, who is the character who discovers the Gloaming. It's his field journal. Do you know what I mean? It's like when Darwin discovered the Galapagos Islands, and it was like you sent Jim Henson to Thra, and he's discovering Skeksis and Uru and Gelflings. What the hell is this? I can't believe it. You can't. Like Galapagos was another world to Darwin because it really was.
Mm.
And that stuff fascinates me. And so I want to take the medieval fantasy Dungeons and Dragons approach to that, where over the 300 or 400 pencil illustrations and watercolor paintings I've done for the Gloaming over the last 20 years, they're all getting put together in his field guide. So one, it's an art book that can help you understand the world of the Gloaming better, but because of his notes and everything, you can use this book as an artifact within the game that if your players find, they're going to be able to deal with the characters better because there'll be little notes about what he discovered about this character, or the dietary requirements of this character, or this particular plant, which grows in this season on this part of the Gloaming, conducts a docile quality in this creature for 30 minutes per dosage, blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? So these are the little interesting notes he's written, but if you read it right as a player, it's like, oh, remember we couldn't get the Fescalion's egg 3 games ago. It's like, if we can find enough of this, we can maybe knock it out. So how do we find it? It's like, wasn't that particular creature trading in that? Yeah, but that's 3 swamps away. So okay, well we can, it's I want it to be as real and as magical for that. Like you can't get that in a 2-hour movie, but like for me, I'd love this, if there was an afterlife, I'd love it to be in Thra or the Labyrinth. I'd love to spend an eternity looking under every little cobblestone. You know what I mean? It's like I want to give players that experience. And so but I guess that's the 20 yearsness of it, is that everything I come up with and enjoy, and it's like, well, how does that thing survive? How does that thing exist? And it's just it's like lungs, it's like one thing leads to another thing and it just branches off, and I'm so obsessive and compulsive that and fascinated with this own world that I'm kind of discovering as I create it, that I have to follow each one of those branches, and also if I create it, I've also got to illustrate it. But my favorite type of illustration is sculpting. So more often than not, I'm hand sculpting it. But there's a lot of, so Thelonious Cretch's guide will help you understand everything in the Gloaming, like to a David Attenborough documentary level. But like I say, you as the dungeon master can also have it as an artifact that, oh, you found the Felonious Creatures, his field book, um, and and so your players can pass that round, or take
Mm.
it between sessions and come up with plans around what they are learning from the gloaming, as well. And it's also a visual guide into the world. And the monster manual is also a visual guide to the players, but incredibly helpful to the DM.
Hmm.
And um, and I've created this DM screen as well, which you just put on the table, and it drops you into an entire scene of the gloaming, so you're visually always in the world. What's really exciting about it is we're creating a really unique system of not only how to play really small characters, but the mounts you can use for them. So you can play like different buttocks that may be like this big, that ride squirrels or owls or badgers, hedgehogs, otters, barn owls, rabbits, a lot of Eurocentric creatures. But we're devising a system where you can play them as a playable character in the same way that, like, you might want to play a barbarian as your class as you go through a D&D adventure.
Hmm.
But like, if you were presented if there was like a D&D game of the Labyrinth, right? Like, you can play Ludo or you can play Sir Didymus. It's like, well, Ludo's obviously going to just be a heavy hitter and go the whole way through. It's like, oh, I want to play Sir Didymus is the interesting one. Like, he's not actually that strong, but he doesn't know it. Do you know what I mean? And because of that, like, he's beating up Ludo. And like, I want people to be able to play a character that exciting, but have the dynamics work out feasibly and logically as well. I'm a little guy. It's never stopped me. And it's so I like the idea that not only you can play these tiny creatures as playable races within the gloaming, but you're also going to, obviously they're plentiful NPCs and provide a lot of different character dynamics in the world of the gloaming, but you're going to be able to play them as character dynamics, as playable characters. But what's really interesting to me about playing in the world of the gloaming is, if you want to just bash your way through it, you get all the stats to beat that monster, or take their loot, whatever. But for me, it's like, I'm really interested in how real life influences the creator. Like, Vietnam became Ewoks, for George Lucas. Boy racing became the Millennium Falcon. Write what you know. Battle of the Somme was hugely influential to Tolkien. The whole Sam and Frodo dynamic. That's interesting to me. But I've never driven an axe through someone's head as much as I've wanted to sometimes. Like, all of my conflicts have been about dealing with people or situations and stuff like that. And so it's for me, like, there's as much of an importance as negating conflict through trade or conversation as there is to just getting out your broadsword. And so that's important to me. But to do that, you've got to know everything about these characters. You've got to know their allegiances, and what are those allegiances, and who are those people they're pledged to, or why don't they like that faction, or why does that creature have a leather waistcoat made out of that other creature? Does that affect that creature? If you're friends with that creature, will that now creature wearing the waistcoat not like you? Whatever, like, that's what the gloaming is to me, is creating as realistic an environment out of this medieval folklore. So when a player asks, I want to do this, the DM, he knows, it's like, yeah, you can do that, but your affiliation is what? That's right. And you're wearing this, and you've just 2 games ago traded with this character. Well, that's been reported back to here, blah, blah, blah. And the stats are equivalent. It's not just, oh, you want to talk to him? Okay, yep, have a chat. Like, it's, yeah, but to do that, you have to take fantasy and creation really seriously. Lucky for me, I've spent 20 years at WETA Workshop, where like, they literally make fantasy movies different now because of Fellowship of the Ring. I work in that place because I saw Fellowship of the Ring, and a lot of my brain melted out of my nose, and I decided I have to work for this place. It's, you know what I mean? As the attention, like, the first time you watch Fellowship of the Ring, you're not watching a movie. You really got a ticket somewhere else, you
Mm.
know. Um, and again, it's so ridiculous that my ambition has been to create a D&D setting that can do that for you without moving images or an audible soundtrack to the most popular book of the last century, that outsold the Bible. But that's what my ambition was, and because when you're surrounded by it every day, and I always feel very fortunate to have not lost my passion for film and creativity and storytelling through having worked in it.
Mm.
That I'm not saying anything about WETA. WETA's just been an absolute amazing place to work for. But a lot of the times when you get your job and your passion, it can be destroyed, especially over 20 years. But I just walked out of that every day. I spent 20 years looking forward to going to work every day, creatively speaking, at least, and because, you know, I spent 19 years prior to that failing school and being told had a learning disorder. And then I spent 20 years teaching myself any creative thing I wanted to from the world's leading genius in that thing and excelling at it and figuring out I just don't like maths. I can learn really well. It's if if they were teaching maths like this troll slew 15 goblins on the field of battle, like, how many goblins in this regiment, I would probably be working for NASA as a mathematician. But it's a theme is very important to me. But and speaking of theme and going through the gloaming, I have so all of the gloaming is it's this world that's been opened up to mankind, and uh, so I love the TV show Deadwood, and also I'm from New Zealand, which was a country colonized by Europe, and Deadwood was taken away from its indigenous inhabitants once there was wealth to be found there, and just decimated. And I'm creating a world like that, but for the Fae folk. If it was today or if it was 2,000 years ago, if a portal was discovered into the fairy world, it wouldn't be like, oh, nice to meet you. Well, you do your thing, we'll do ours. It would be like, all right, let's claim it. Go in there. And if they were peaceful, lies would be made up against them that they're not, so they could be killed. So they're stealing babies.
Mm.
Whatever they do, and they'd go and destroy them. And the political dynamics and the social dynamics, that's all really fascinating to me. So that's a huge, huge part of it. But because of that, when you enter the Gloaming, you're probably going to meet human raiding parties as well. And so there's a current printable scenery campaign running that is made up out of things I've designed that is very much going to be a huge part of the settlement that has been built outside of this portal. But there's characters in that go through that, and obviously you're one of them. And I made you this thing. Where is it? So, so we've physically made you as a character, and you've got your cat, and you're holding a book, and you're holding a warhammer because you are like the scholar and knowledge keeper of all things Games Workshop at this point. But it's not a Games Workshop model; it's a Gloaming model. And also, like I'm talking about how like the Felonious Cretch notebook, like for me, I've got characters in there that are obviously just badasses that want to go and rip shit up and cut through, and the Judge Dredd guys, right, which everyone wants to play. I'm one of them, right? But as I'm not a particularly violent person, like the characters I'm more interested in, what else would you go to a place to explore for as opposed to just pillaging? And so you are a lore master, right? And there's all sorts of characters, but so by now your picture that I've designed and Mikey Gilbert has sculpted, and you can get now from printable scenery, the Jordan sorcery figure has gone across the screen, but I know your love of that wizard who summoned the gargoyles and have the wreaked, right?
Yeah.
And I also know that your Marienburg army is as a rule set for yourself to make it is out of all these amazing old Games Workshop models. And as much as I made this character with a Marienburg vibe for you, I don't want to implant a non-Games Workshop figure into your army. So with a bit of a kit bashing and some Hagglethorn Hollow printed scenery, so by the time you air this, I would have finished this and you'll have the actual finished thing. But I've kit bashed you as that wizard on a gargoyle on the town fountain, and say you're summoning the gargoyle. And so this is a bit of terrain that you can put on your battlefields. So we've got some millipede. Here's your miniature. I've made you a wizard hat, and I've even
my
added
word.
a little frog and some mushroom. I'm still working on this at the moment, but that's a little bit of
That's amazing.
some terrain for you, and I'm going to send you the original illustration I did from you as well. But we've also got Louise Suggs. She's a cool pirate adventurer in that port as well. And that's just because I watch like you're the kind of content that I watch while I'm drawing this stuff, and it kind of seeps in there. But but again, but that's like for me, that's like being the director who has a favorite actor that he's found a part for in the movie he's making. Like I'm not making a movie, I'm making a D&D book. And it's like the kind of people I'd want to explore the gloaming with is, like you'd be so interested in the lore if you visited the gloaming. I've got to know what's that, and what inspired this. You know what I mean? Like how I imagine you traveling through the gloaming is more interesting to me than how I'd imagine like Michael Shannon with a broadsword. That'd be so cool. That'd be so interesting. I say Michael Shannon because he's my first choice to play Conan and or Judge Dredd if they ever made my dream movie of those.
That's a cool casting choice. Yeah, I don't think
As
many
Conan,
people would go there.
Well, he is Judge Dredd, right? Because his whole face is just misery. It's just one big chin of misery, and he hates, right? Like even when he tries to smile, he's like, But Conan, he'd have to be in a physical bodysuit. But I think that's the only way you could do it to ever get past how awesome Arnold physically looked. And so, like Arnold looks amazing but can't really act. Michael Shannon can really, really act, but no one could ever get Arnold's physique again. And so you'd make that concession, get over it, and just have like the best Conan movie anyway. But this is the kind of stuff I do that's going to make this another 3-hour interview, so don't get me started.
So you've talked about the gloaming as almost this sandbox world, loads of really interesting lore and monsters and characters and all that sort of great like political side of stuff as well. As a player or sort of a party, how would we be getting involved? Are there adventures that are there for us to go on? What's the sort of
absolutely
access route?
because like the gloaming as a word, its meaning is that that moment between like the day ending and the night starting. It's almost like this golden hour. Well, that's been so mysterious to mankind for so long that the word twilight and gloaming. There's several words for it, but the gloaming for me has been one of my favorite words forever. And it was sort of when I've actually, I've written the entire gloaming narrative out in a trilogy of books that may never be read, but it wasn't lost on me that the fact that like if you were to game in Middle Earth, you would be able to run that game so easily because you knew the world so well. If I was to tomorrow have people over and run a game set in Discworld or Westeros or Narnia or Middle Earth or Mega City 1, I could name McShane, stop grizzling. That's my dog grizzling or something. I could name so many so many worlds, Gormenghast, whatever, so many worlds that I'm really familiar with that just off the top of my head, I could safely, without much prep, guide you through that world and have a fun night doing it because the world was important to me. The theme was Star Wars, forget about it. Take you there now, and because I love it. And I felt in order to make the gloaming as feasible and realistic and as important to players as those other worlds are to me, which is ridiculous because they've had a bit more marketing. But I needed to know that world absolutely back to front. I needed to know the Gloaming as well as Tolkien knew Middle Earth, you know? And so I wrote this trilogy of books. I spent years doing it. And so now when I'm working with my writer, Matt Rauscher, who's making stats for these creatures, when he throws out an idea, more often than not, it's like, yeah, exactly, because this guy really gets it. But I'm also able to tell him, no, that wouldn't happen, as opposed to being like, oh, okay, sure, that's cool. Do you know what I mean? Or I'm able to steer him in a way because I've been there, you know, like
Hmm.
I'm a veteran of the Gloaming because of the groundwork I've put into it. And so that's what I want to bring to people playing in it. And so this first, I don't want to say taste because it's so much more than a taste. It's so much more than an entree. But the this first offering is the monster manual, and like that's what I was saying. The Gloaming, like, is that twilight period, and mythologically speaking, that's when people believed that that was when the veil between the fairy world and our human world was the thinnest, and that's when most, like nowadays, bunch of people believe they seen aliens. Like it's back then, people was like that, but they were about fairies. Aliens didn't exist to them; they hadn't made them up yet, or heard of them, or discovered them, or been visited by them. I'm on either side of that fence, undecided. But in terms of the fairies, same. Like if they were proven to be true tomorrow, it'd be like awesome. If they were never discovered, it's like, oh, it was good fun though, wasn't it? Anyway, but back then it was like, I saw a fairy. It's like, I do believe I've seen a gnome. Like that was their aliens and Sasquatch back then. And they all of those sightings, well, a lot of those sightings took place in the Gloaming, that period where the veil was thinnest. And so what the Gloaming Monster Manual is able to do is any one of these monsters can plug directly into the campaign you've been playing for 15 years. And we've got a rule set on how that can happen with because you're at a tavern and some guy gives you the quest to find out about the Wailing Wench in the Babadook Hills, right? You've got to get there. And so all of my Gloaming encounters can take place on your between, it gives your DM, if anything else, time to set up for what's going to happen when they get to those hills. But here's all these creatures that would come out if they're traveling through the forest at this particular time, or they find this particular waystone or Gloaming statue. But also the Gloaming itself is a world that you like. So that is a random encounter of the Gloaming that can get placed into anybody's game set. But it's also this entire world that through particular means that you can find and go through without having that kind of ticking clock or that randomization to it. And so I'm building up. So if and when this project funds, it also is helping me develop the next book for next year, which I've been working on for 7 years now, which is the Gloaming campaign setting, which is that whole township, that Deadwood-like township I told you about. But just like the Gloaming, where I've built every single creature. I mean, this guy here is this is the dwarven troubadour who's like a one-man band like Tom Waits, who's a dwarf in the Gloaming who travels in this troll wagon, right? So that whole township, every single building is hand sculpted, every single room, every single item, every single person that occupies that township is built. It's the size of my entire studio. It has over 50 buildings. And every single building you can trade for from stuff you get in the Gloaming, to the point where you can use particular types of bile from the Gloaming and other fungi to brew some sort of mechanicus fuelant that can power these kind of like barrel like automatons that you can hire or craft and go into the Gloaming and have better odds of taking out a hill troll with. You know what I mean? You can get this in power loader or wizard or knight, all sorts of forms depending on how much money you've made from going into the Gloaming and how many resources you've got to trade for it. And the economy is can be anything from like it's that's my dog drinking down there. I'm wondering what that sounded. Okay, Appa. Come in. So here we go. Hello.
Oh.
So you
You say
can
his name was
like
Appa?
Appa, yeah, from Last
Oh,
Airbender. So,
fantastic! Yeah,
well, I named the first dog, so the wife named the second one. So the first dog's called McShane after the actor Ian McShane
of
from
course.
Deadwood.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, um, but so like the economy in the gloaming is really interesting to me. It's not just about how much gold you've got in your purse, but like economy, like in life, for what I found, like here's the thing. So early on at WETA Workshop, I discovered more and more I was taking more time off working on these blockbuster movies that I dreamed my entire life of working on to work on the gloaming.
Hmm.
And so I'd work on Tintin for as long as I could just to fund another 6 months of me working on the gloaming. I ended up in this fantasy movie by accident that I didn't want to be in, but I used all the money I got from that movie to make the gloaming even bigger. And so soon, by the time I was about 25, I realized that my currency is creative freedom. It's not money. Because I didn't like money just turned into gloaming or Warhammer for me. It's and so that's what I realized. Current like Weta could have paid me in Warhammer and I would have still worked. Anyway, but so like my and so when I realized my currency was creative freedom, it's always made me think about currency, and currency is going to be very interesting in the gloaming because yeah, there's going to be a currency in terms of gold, silver, bronze, or whatever, but that's brought from the human world that are colonizing it. But there's a currency in foraging is a big currency because of all the different flora and fauna. I've created entire different unique gloaming flora and fauna, and every one of those, just like when you find different things in Zelda Breath of the Wild,
Hmm.
you're going to be able to collect and experiment with potion craft, but also that current like because there's no coins or metal in the gloaming, the foraging stuff that you collect is the currency you trade with the creatures of the gloaming, because it's a food. Like I guess that for me, the gloaming, if you boiled it down to like a sizzle reel elevator pitch, it's it's like Mad Max Fury Road, but it's in a forest, not an apocalyptic wasteland. Everyone still has one pair of clothes. It's really, really dangerous. People like are lucky to see the next day, and they're trading and hiding and fighting and surviving. But it's just in a beautiful, lush forest as
Hmm.
opposed to a desert. There's a Morton Joe like characters, there's Furiosa type characters, and then there's all the terrified little begging for water characters. There's blood boys, and there's blood banks. It's it's that kind. It's like Cormac McCarthy's The Road meets the Dark Crystal.
I mean,
And
it
that's important
feels
to me.
to me. It sounds like as a D&D supplement, and especially where it's going with that campaign setting, it sort of reminds me a little bit of maybe so like Monty Cook's Tollus, that sort of big city as a an immersive environment, or for Legend of the Five Rings, you've got the City of Lies. So like these supplements that are deep and rich and full of just information about. You can set an entire campaign here if you wanted to, or you could just visit
That's
it for
exactly
one
what it
adventure.
is. Exactly.
Yeah.
So the Gloaming can be one campaign, the city will be one campaign. But for me, like I've played D&D campaigns where you go into a big city and you've got this big map, and the drawings almost just look like Monopoly buildings.
Hmm.
And there's 300 buildings, and you get to know about what like 38 of them are. And that, like for me, and that's great. And I'm not dissing those books, you know, um, at all. But for me, like again, I'm always trying to create what I want, right? And now a publishing company doesn't want to pay someone to sculpt every single building over 7 years and figure out every single thing that's hidden under every floorboard, and which Woodwose is having an affair with which goblin's wife, whatever. They don't care. You know what I mean? Like it's unfeasible. But for me, when the DM for the games I've played or the books I've read from, when I see that big city, there's 300 buildings but only 38 tags, and then you cross reference that tag from that quickly drawn building, and it's a couple lines. It's not good enough because in the same way that when you play Breath of the Wild or Skyrim, right? Like your mission is to to save Hyrule from Ganondorf or whatever, right? But how much do you take your sweet time going into every single building and perusing their shop items? Like that's half the fun of it. Like technically, Link is a terrible hero when you play him, right? Because you're supposed to be saving the world, but you're collecting grandma's chickens you know, for a special hat. You know what I mean? But also that's what's fun and that's what's important for me, right? And so I like every single building in the Gloam Port and every single character is going to be accounted for. So when someone says, "I want to go into that building," the dungeon master's like, "Oh, it's just they make candles." I was like, "Okay, what kind of candles?" They're gonna, it's like, "Oh, okay, well, here's the list. Here's the what are they made from?" So, well, they're made from this. But if you go to the Gloaming and provide this sort of wax from this shaly nest, not only will you get this discount, but they'll make you a candle that can do this for X hours, blah, blah, blah. Like, wow, okay, I'm putting that on my mission. So like later on, when they're doing a big mission and they're like, "Oh, you're attacked by Shayleys," it's like, "Where's their nest?" "What do you mean?" So, well, once I defeat the Shayleys, I'm going to scrape that resin out of their nest because they're going to make me this, they're going to wax up my leather armor with that, and I'm going to get +3 hit points on it, whatever, you know what I mean? Like I want every single thing to have an exciting reason that if you play like I play, everything has everything, like it's not just fluff. It's there's consequence to everything from if you put your blade and took a life and killed that character, there's consequence, or if you listened to a flippant sentence that shopkeeper said about honey. You know what I mean? Like it's all part of this world. Yeah, and it's the more I hear it come out of my mouth, the more I'm like, what was I thinking? But at least I'm now at the point of being able to say, what was I thinking right at the end that I've achieved it, and that's nice. Because I mean, I think I've said before, my if I had a superpower, it would be utter naivety. If I'd ever looked forward into like what it was going to take me to do things I've done, I would have been overwhelmed and not done them. But it's not the kind of superpower that Xavier's hiring for his X-Men. You know, Logan, Cyclops, Storm, naivety, Magneto's back. You know, I'm not going to be on the team, but it's I don't think I'd go well fighting Magneto.
What is the Kickstarter offering then? So this is happening very soon, right? The Gloaming is hitting
so
Kickstarter.
It's going to be offering the monster manual, which has all the rules for like 150 unique creatures, which also comes with at the moment will unlock more and more. But there's going to be 7 new complete playable races. The most interesting of which for me are the small Bodox, so you can play a small character, and the mounts and the rules of being a small character with a mount. And of course, there are also NPCs and characters you can come up against. They all are, and you're going to get some maps and some side quests to make sure that you can use this book as an adventure as well as just plugging into your regular thing. But you're also going to get Felonious Critch's field guide to the Gloaming, which is a complete art. All of it's created as like an art of book, but all of the rules are the main thing and really useful. There's the DM screen. There's going to be limited edition art prints, and also a Gloaming adult coloring in book. That's not to say there's like sexy fairies. I just mean like adult, as in like it's production value, like serious fairy art in black and white on the quality coloring in paper. That's just a bit of fun. Not important to your D&D playing, but some people mentioned it and have asked for it, and we're happy to provide it. And yeah, it's just this is a small, exciting, achievable offer, that we're getting out there to basically prove what we can do and deliver it and basically be the gateway to what's going to be this campaign book. that we're working on. And I mean, I've published a lot of books already. I mean, these are. Oh, what's also exciting is I started this other project called The Wandering Woods with these kind of plant-based creatures in it. And this is all. I'll send you some pictures, but these are books from my exhibitions have torn New Zealand, America, Korea, and China. These are some books from the exhibitions. Here's another Gloaming book, and then we did the Hagglethorn Hollow book for Hagglethorn Hollow, which took a while because COVID COVID happened right after we funded, and it was just a nightmare. But one of the things I'm most proud of is while this is years and years ago now, but while other companies were their Kickstarters kind of collapsed and they couldn't refund and they never delivered a product and everything, we did everything. We got everything out, and it was financially stressful and everything like that. But I was really proud to deliver on that promise. And also, what I learned as well when I made the Hagglethorn Hollow book, we got the person that put together all of WETA Workshop's Art of the Hobbit and Art of Lord of the Rings. I wanted my book to be as good as any book WETA Workshop ever done, which was, again, really ambitious for my first book. And we absolutely achieved that, and everyone's really happy with that book. But what I learned is I'm going into this next Kickstarter having most of the book completely finished. You know what I mean? And but it still obviously needs it's what Kickstarter is meant for. It's I'm not doing it through Tabletop Troubadour Games, who made Hagglethorn Hollow, because that's terrain. This is a book I'm working on. It's really just me getting a book out there, and the Kickstarter is just really to help get it from my hard drive and my brain into a published book and to you. And like, again, all of that funding is all figured out just to really get that book out there and to the world. And it's not something I would be doing if I wasn't incredibly proud of the work. And as a New Zealander, it's incredibly hard for me to be proud about anything, which is why you'll notice I don't really have an online presence, because the idea of waving my own flag makes me physically ill. The only time I'm ever really online is when you or Adam Savage have asked to do an interview with me, which is like lovely and incredibly flattering. And it's easy for me because it's just talking to a mate, And whenever someone says, "Oh, you come across well, or you're quite natural," it's like, that's just talking to a mate at a party. Like, you can do that, it's but so that's easy. But like, so in terms of the Gloaming being actually out there and known, even though it's traveled the world, and it's been 20 years, it still has quite a small, I guess, online impact, really. And so, I mean, any help I can get at this point, like I said at the start, I mean, we're collecting email addresses on the website, and we've got some great competitions going, and there's already a holding page for the Kickstarter. But yeah, again, I'm really proud of the work. I've got no delusions of grandeur, but I've seen a lot of Kickstarters do 1/6 of this work and do quite well. But again, a lot of that there is being about really media savvy and influencer savvy and all that, and algorithm savvy. And I just work too many hours in the day to have like, when I'm passionate about something, obviously I give it 110%. But we've got some great people helping us get it out there and help with the socials and the marketing. But it's yeah, I mean, that's what I love about the content you put on Jordan Sorcery. Like, I just love hearing these kind of humble creatives that I mean, nearly all of them really should be as well known as Dali or Picasso in my mind. What they do is nothing less than I mean, I to be honest, I like Adrian Smith's work better than any of those artists. You know what I mean? But like, there's something. I mean, what a lot of the people you talk to as artists, what they've achieved is like for me in their genre Olympian god status. You know,
Mm.
the Paul Bonners, the Brian Frowers, Adrian Smith. The you know, there's and that's how I felt when I started at WETA, like working next to Daniel Falcon or Jamie Biswara. I mean, like I was in meetings with I was I was a conceptual artist peer with John Howe and Alan Lee. You know what I mean? And just that's like an actor getting a speaking part in the same scene as Ian McShane and John Hurt or something. Like it's as good as it absolutely gets. Um, yeah, so but it's funny, I guess, in the same way that we keep going back to Dark Crystal and not finding its audience in the greater scheme of the world. Fantasy is often not seen as important, even though our whole imaginations, um, so much of our culture is really a flow-on effect from people coming up with fantastical stories around a campfire, and drawing them and just coming up with creatures and like cot death becomes changelings and spirited away creatures, or like a squirrel breaking a branch in a hedge becomes a brownie and they'd leave milk out for them. Like the way human consciousness spans into telling stories to make up for things you're scared of or can't understand or don't want to deal with
Mm.
becomes folklore, and it's all so different now. But like it's such a human experience. And I really think it's a shame that when you get to be as good as an artist as an Adrian Smith or a Paul Bonner or a Brian Froud or a John Howe or an Alan Lee, and that they, but the world as a whole, the fan people like us, we know what we're looking at. We know that they're geniuses, right? But like some of their stuff, like the work they've done in their lives to get as good as what they've done,
Mm.
they really should be in these museums with
Mm.
all of the Ninja Turtles, with the Michelangelos and the Leonardos. You know what I mean? Like they should be hanging up there
Yeah.
with those great artists. The I don't know, government somewhere need to be making some venue to display this art to the same level, because some of them have just achieved such great feats. And it's the same with what limited time and resources that I've got, on this planet with my weak little asthma young lungs and my yam fingers. All I can try to do is just aspire to be 1/16th as good as some of these people, whose work I love so much. Um, and it's and tabletop gaming. I talked about it a lot more in our last interview, but I spent most of my life thinking being a conceptual designer for the biggest company on the biggest movies was the height of world building. But I realized it took 17 years, but I realized that tabletop gaming really is the height of world building.
Mm.
The the boundaries and the limitations that you get in film with producers or directors that are all relevant and completely there for a reason, and there's no complaints there, but they don't exist as much sometimes at all in tabletop gaming. And everything I've taken from 2 decades designing for film and television, I just get so obsessed and excited to pour back into the the gloaming and my tabletop gaming worlds, because I have no restrictions. I don't have to go. I don't have to go to like 2 hour meetings I don't want to be in. I don't have to like do what I think is exactly the right design and have a Titan director who does know better tell me, oh, that's not what we want or something. Again, relevant, important, and great experiences. And I'm not saying like I loved all of it, but I also think there's something really true about that first strike of creativity, and that's what I loved so much about Guillermo del Toro, is that you'd be halfway through a design and he'd be like, "It's in the movie, I love it," you know. And, oh, can I finish it? No, you know. And when he saw it, he knew it, and he got there, you know. And I've always tried to, when I was working on the Squickerwonkers for Evangeline Lilly, I'd come up with a character and then I go, okay, that's the character, and then I'll try to draw it much more accurate and professionally, and it never had the same energy. And that's one of the earlier experience. This is years ago now, over a decade, but it was one of the earlier experiences I had with realizing that there is something in that first spew of creative energy onto the page that is quite important and quite exciting. And that's why the first month of any, sometimes I work on movies for a couple years or a couple months or whatever, but the first couple weeks of working on any movie, whether it was Prince Caspian or the BFG or the Hobbit or whatever it was, those are always really exciting because that's when you get to do your idea of what those things are. And then the director sees 10 designers creative vomit and cherry picks from those things. And then the brief starts funneling into the cherry picks, right? Which is a different phase, but an equally exciting phase, because now you've got limitations, which can be really exciting and influence you, right? But I always felt like some of my best work came from that ravenous, exciting, like, we can do whatever we think Gloin, Gimli's father, should look like. It's like, I'm getting paid to draw what I think Radagast should look like, or this is my idea of a hill troll, or this is how I saw the BFG when I was read the book at 6 or whatever, you know, and you get to do that, and it's so exciting. And I guess for me, you know, that's the ice cream of the job, right? And for me, the Gloaming has been all ice cream. It's had the limitations and the constrictions of budget, time, and logic, you know. Like, I haven't been able to approach this like a James Cameron and with $1 billion, 2,000 people, and a decade. Do you know what I mean? Like, and if I had, it would be something completely different and maybe something that wasn't any good. But you know, but again, the Gloaming for me has been like all the ice cream of my creative endeavors and my creative worth. And like I said, Brad, at the start, it's the trickle of distilled liquor that has come from every job I've ever worked on, every film I've seen and felt something from, every game of D&D I've played, which melted my brain. And, you know, every time I've rolled a dice in the Dungeons of HeroQuest or the Cursed City, you know, every book from Terry Pratchett to the Black Library, everything that's ever made me go, oh, turn another page. The Gloaming is the distilled liquor of that. And so I hope it finds its audience, and I hope people can get, you know, even like a third excited about it as I have been creating it. Yeah.
I mean, I certainly do. I hope it finds its audience as well. And I think the thing I'm most excited about is absolutely getting to sample that pure, unfiltered passion and creativity that you've poured into it over the last 20 years. So I'm very excited.
I can't wait to get you some good stuff for that.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it, honestly. But when is the Kickstarter actually starting? Do you have a set date, or do you have a sort of period?
Well, at the moment, we're aiming for June, right? But I'm an absolute perfectionist, and it's really important. It's always been really important to me that what I'm showing you is what you're going to get. Like, when people couldn't believe our prices or what they were seeing on the Hagwithon Hollow campaign. But, you know, to get you Hagwithon Hollow painted, you know, we didn't make a lot of money on that because I wanted that on your gaming table. But also, it was a huge endeavor to get a factory to paint something for your tabletop the same way I had lovingly done over months. And we got there, and it took a long time, and it took a lot of money, but that's what I demand of. And so, but I put that on the Kickstarter, and that's what you got, right? And so it's so we're so close, and I'm pretty confident it'll be June. But if it's even 5% off what I know is going to be on your table, I might push it. But
Sure.
so that's one thing. So like
we're talking, yeah, June or soon-ish, and the best place for people to
it's coming. Yeah,
it's coming soon, and the best place for people to find any information about it is the Gloaming website, right, and the mailing list, which I'll link below.
Yeah, there's a website that'll alert you, and there's also already a Kickstarter holding page that'll alert you, and on this video you would have seen a bunch of images from what I'm doing that I'm going to be sending Jordan tomorrow, just so you're not looking at handsome aging faces. Realistic, if I grew my hair out and wore glasses, it would be like really funny how similar it would look.
I think you'd wear it better, if I'm honest. But no, that's been awesome to chat with you again, Johnny. Thank you so much. I am genuinely super excited about the Gloaming. I cannot wait to see it and to spend some time exploring the world exactly as you've imagined it. So it's something definitely worth looking forward to. And everyone who's watching should go and check it out on the website, on your Instagram, and just get sharing it, get talking about it, because it's looking really, really fantastic.
Thanks, man. Thanks so much. And expect your little terrain package and some artwork coming your way soon. As we talked about, I was going to have it with you already, but it was going to take a couple of weeks to get sent to you, and I just wanted to jump on an interview with you already. So, and thanks for your time, and thanks again for your content. One of the best things about being so busy on the Gloaming is that I've got about 2 or 3 more videos of yours logged up that I haven't seen yet, which never happens because I usually see them the day they come out. So it's very rarely I get to like binge for a couple hours while I'm working. So that's my day tomorrow.
Great. Well, I hope you enjoy them. Yeah. Fantastic. All right. Thank you, Johnny.
Thanks, Jordan. Thanks, Martha. Bye.
Thank you so much to Johnny for agreeing to join me once again and chat. As last time, it was totally awesome. I had a fantastic time. If you didn't get the chance to see that previous conversation where we talk about the movies that Johnny's been involved with and lots of his amazing work outside of the Gloaming, then you can check out this link right here. I genuinely loved talking with Johnny. It was totally awesome, and I cannot wait to spend more time in the Gloaming. And if you want to find out more about this amazing setting, then I've put a link to the Kickstarter and to the website down below. Plus, you can actually win original sculptures and original art from the world of the Gloaming if you go and check it out now and register and sign up and do whatever else you need to do via those links. An incredible opportunity to be part of an incredible world. If you enjoy the work that I do here on the channel and want to support me to do more of it, then feel free to check out my Patreon via the link in the description. And if you can like and share and subscribe to this channel as well, then that is enormously helpful. So thank you if you are able to do that. I should also mention that you can now listen to most of my interviews as a podcast. So if you go into your podcast catcher of choice and search for In Conversation with Jordan Sorcery, then you should be able to find it and subscribe to it. Thank you once again to Johnny for joining me. Thank you for watching and listening. I'm Jordan, and this is Jordan Sorcery.